here are the world experts that I'm going to introduce to you. Professor Eliyahu Rips, who I've been talking about, just a sweet, humble, soft-spoken genius. I've been to his apartment in Jerusalem. I've spent a lot of time with him in New York when he was here a few years ago. And he writes me when he's worried about America. He loves America, and he worries about me. Thinks it's getting too violent here. Professor Robert Haralick, he's actually a professor of, his actual title is Distinguished Professor of Computer Science at City University in New York. What he's currently doing, last time I talked to him about a month ago, I actually had Glazerson in the car with me. He came to visit me in Los Angeles, so I said, let's call up Robert and see what he's doing. So I can usually never get him on the phone because he's so busy teaching. I said, so what is it you're doing? He said, I'm working with DNA. And I said, oh, we've done quite a bit of that ourselves. What are you doing? And he said, until about 10 years ago, they only thought that there were 20 amino acids in DNA. And I said, okay. He said, well, we found there's actually 22, the same number of amino acids as are characters in the Hebrew language. And he said, now we think we can have a different way to find Torah codes using DNA and actually find in-depth information about anybody. I said, that's crazy. And of course, a lot of my Jewish friends believe in reincarnation. When they read the passage of Nicodemus, what do I have to do? You must be born again. They go, oh, well, that means that he's being reincarnated. They all think that. I mean, that's just the way they believe. And I'm going, well, not necessarily, but I mean, that's what they think. So Professor Haralick believes that the DNA would even show everybody's past lives. I mean, that's how deep into it he is. This is what always intrigues me about the whole orthodoxy. And this is Rabbi Matityahu Glazerson, who's done, 3,000 tables maybe by now. He writes me every day, sends me new tables all the time. We work together quite often. He's like part of the family. He'll come over to my house and raid my refrigerator. And I really mean it when I say, and I've told other people this, but I really mean it because, I'd be like in the stairway where he can't see me and I'm tearing up. I told, Lord, it's almost like I've got Elijah walking through my house. This is just so cool, And, we have this really weird relationship. He knows I'm a Christian and he's a, Orthodox Jew. Glot kosher, everything has to be just so. I've actually cooked for him at home, and he'll ask me, what do Christians think about this? And I'll say, what do you think about that? And we have these really deep discussions about stuff I couldn't have with anybody else. I mean, because he knows all about the Torah, plus he knows all about the ancient Jewish mystical texts, which I don't look at as being scripture, but I do believe that these are God's chosen people, right? We all believe that. So God has imparted certain information on that maybe the rest of us don't quite get. So I want to know what he knows. I'm really intrigued with it. And it's not like I'm going orthodox or anything like that. I just want to have a better understanding of these guys so I can better relate to them. And if I'm sharing Christ with them, I don't do it in a way that it offends them. That we can stay, But at this point, he's like part of the family. This is Professor Alexander Rotenberg. He's a graduate of Moscow University. He's just incredibly brilliant. He was the guy that invented the Torah code crossword puzzle of look that we're talking about. He was the guy that did the graphic representation of the codes that we use today. This is Art Levitt. Art Levitt is just really super straight-laced about the codes. If you haven't done them a priori, and if you don't know a p-value for them, then they don't mean anything. They're like ordinary, he said. So he works really close with Rips, and Rips and him get along really great. So I really respect Art's stuff. And but they all have their own way of looking at the Torah and pulling things out of it. Glazerson has this really deep understanding of ancient Hebrew. Art Levitt looks at it kind of mathematically like Professor Rips does. Rotenberg's totally different because he's at like the coding level himself. I mean, all these guys are incredibly brilliant and talented, and I love hanging out with them. So here we go. It's one of my favorite tables. It's beyond coincidence to me. So you have this whole line of text. It says, what is their heart? United States, the abomination unto the Lord, and 90-degree angle at the same angle as this, Obama and Hillary. And then right here, the left. And then right here, crossing it, they are defiled. But the weird thing is, all this came up under the plain text, an abomination unto the Lord, Deuteronomy 17:1. And they didn't, Glazerson didn't force this table to end up on the plain text that actually said that. It just happened that way. So, and then at the very bottom it says, cursed will be the taker of bribery. And that's also in the plain text. The next is one by Art Levitt. His are real simple, clean, and direct, and couldn't have been put there by random chance. Saddam will die, hanged, like his brother. All in a tiny little table with just maybe, 150 characters? So it's not like stuff scattered all over the page like you see on YouTube, that kind of deal. It's just a tiny little, very precise table. Here's another one. You guys know who George Norrie is at Coast to Coast AM? Well, George had me on to talk about the Torah codes when we first released the film, and this guy calls in from, someplace in Canada at 10 till 2 a.m. in the morning to ask, is the Torah codes the book of life? I said, that's a really good question, and Glazerson and I have discussed that. And wouldn't it be ironic if we've all been carrying the book of life around with us, going do-do-do-do-do, and, are our names in there or not? And so the reason I began wondering if that could be the case is because I asked Glazerson, can you find everybody's name in the Torah? No, we can't. I said, you can't? So that made me really suspicious, like not everybody's name was in the Torah codes. So then when I said that on the air, George goes, I got to know if I'm in it. I said, okay, well, we got to take this offline because you're going to have to give me some personal information. He said, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. So George calls me at home and gave me all this info, and I gave it to the rabbis. And I said, look, there's 3 million people listening to this show. We got to do a table for George Norrie. And I don't ask this lightly because I know it's a lot of work. So it took them 3 weeks. And they did 9 tables for me. But this particular one was done by Professor Rips, and it's typically his style. It's a complete sentence. I'm not trying to ignore you guys over there. I can only point at one screen at a time. But basically, they understand that George likes the paranormal, okay? So the whole string right down the middle, the key words for this table say, loves the paranormal, but clear cut. So he's not like crazy. He believes the paranormal's real, and he loves dealing with it. That's George, okay? And then Art worked on it too, and found broadcaster right there, radio, crossing the whole deal, and then Norrie right next to it. And it was incredible. I printed these out on really big pages and sent them to George so he'd have them. Here's one that Matityahu Glazerson keeps looking up my name and pin light in the tables. He keeps finding stuff. I don't ask him always to do this, but then when we released the film in 5775, he found the keywords, the code will be distributed. And then right under it is my name. And he goes, well, that's really significant because your whole name came up. And then off to the right it says, son of Jesse. And then over here, doctrine of Messiah, Glazerson, Matityahu, his name is in there. And then the cool thing is at the bottom where it says, your eyes which see the deeds of God. Then this is one he just did for me. And this is the keywords were Torah code, the code of Messiah, Pinlight, my company name, ephod, which always comes up in Torah code tables sometimes. And it says 5736. 5736 was the year that Rabbi Yaniv gave the information to Professor Rips that caused him to start looking into the Torah codes. 5736 is 1976. And 5775 is when we first released the film. The deeds of God will show to the world. Then this is one that we have actually in the film. It's the Twin Tower Table Massacre, Twins, Towers, Ishmael Massacre, September 11th, the terror attack. Over the plain text that says, and fell from the people this day about 3,000 men. I mean, there's the whole deal right there. And that's in the plain text, non-encoded. Then this is one on Brett Kavanaugh, which is really, really, when I first thought of that, well, okay, it's a little messy, but then I started really getting into it, which sometimes these take some thought to truly understand them. So you see in a row, it says feminine plot, and then right above that, hatred, and Brett's name there, on the other side, the keyword was Kavanaugh, and against, and then the date, 2018, left, and Amalek. Amalek is always the evil thing. And then the word Samael. Now that was, in Jewish parlance, Samael is an evil angel, the opposite of good. But what's really interesting is the desolation of God, or the left hand, which is so, when I read that, I'm going, wow. I mean, that's like hidden information that, it's the left that was after Kavanaugh. Here's one that we found, because I asked them about it. On the 1st of March, Breitbart was poisoned, will be killed, in the plain text, will be killed in 5772, which is 2012. I mean, that's a really clean table. I mean, there it is. Here's one that I thought was, because we were looking up 2012 tables, we thought maybe that something would happen in 2012. But Glazerson nailed it with this table. Change in the world. On the 10th of Tevet, which is the Jewish calendar for December 22nd. If you remember the Mayan calendar and all of that, the change in the world was supposed to happen on December 21st, right? So this is the day after that in the Hebrew calendar year of 5773, because the dates overlap. We haven't had a new year yet. They had their new year already. So for them, it's 5773. For us, it was 2012 still. And this comes out, change in the world, the day after the Mayan calendar was supposed to explode, or whatever it was supposed to do. And if you think back, a lot of things have happened since then. I mean, the whole world has gone like, everything has been crazy since that time. So this is probably one of the most famous tables. It's the Twin Towers one that Professor Rips found. And there's a little piece of video here that I did a long time ago, but it's so cool that you have to see it again.
Many pages are just empty. But when we came to chapter 20 of this book, then all of them suddenly appear in one place. This shows very clearly how everything concentrated in one single place.
So what he's saying there, he had tractor feed paper. he printed out the entire book of Numbers from the Torah, all of it, and just rolled it out there. And all of the codes for the Twin Towers attack ended up in this little tiny space in chapter 20, the book of Numbers. There they all are right there. The chances of that are 1 in 10 million. Here's the same table, and comparing it with a random monkey text. A monkey text is just a randomized text that has the same number of characters. That random text took 4,488 letters to achieve the same results, whereas Rips's table has 234 letters. Here's another table they did. Herelick did this for me as a comparison. Another random text, 7,772 letters it took to achieve those words, and they're all scattered all over the page. So, if you say it's in Moby Dick or if it's in War and Peace, it doesn't work that way. Now, this is getting into Planet X. I mean, a lot of people, either you love the idea or you hate it, or you think maybe something's to it or not. But the Jewish rabbis are totally into it, which surprised me. Because I was listening to a lecture yesterday about Tower of Babel here. And it reminded me of one of my early conversations with Glazerson. And I'm rushing because I don't have much time, but if I go over 5 minutes, there's no one after me, if you aren't falling asleep by then. But we got a late start. But when Glazerson was over at my studio, somehow we got to talking about Noah and the flood and the Tower of Babel. And I'm dying to ask him what he thought of UFOs and all that, and if they were in the codes. But I didn't know him well enough in those days. And then he goes, "Oh, yes, the Tower of Babel was a launching platform for space vehicles." And I said, "What?" And this is a guy that looks like Elijah sitting in my office telling me this. So we know about Nimrod. We know about all that. In the book of Jasher, it says that he wore, and I talked about that. I mentioned this to Gary Sturman the other day. He said he wrote a 7,000-page article about this idea of Nimrod wearing Adam's clothes that God made, and it empowered him. Did you guys know that? I thought that was really intriguing when I read that for the first time. So Glazerson totally believed that the Tower of Babel was something more than just to go up to heaven. It was really going to heaven. Spaceships were landing and stuff like that. It was like a normal deal. So Planet X is a great table. In the end of days, and then in the plain text, in yellow, it says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel." An interesting thing is, in the Zohar, which is a Jewish mystical text, it says, "After 40 days, when the pillar rises from earth to heaven in the eyes of the whole world, and the Messiah has appeared, a star will rise up on the east, blazing in all colors, and 7 other stars will surround that star, and they will wage war on it." So there was a guy, basically all this text below is talking about, there was a man who claimed he was the Messiah years ago. And the Jews didn't believe him because they didn't have the planet in the sky that's predicted in the Zohar. So without that, they knew the guy was a fake. I mean, that's pretty interesting. What does Jesus say? "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, so the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And all the tribes of the earth shall mourn." So before Jesus comes back, there's a sign that appears in heaven. And it's logical that there's some kind of interplanetary event that happens that just wakes everybody up. Of course, in Isaiah 13 and in Isaiah 24 and in Malachi 4, there's all of these things that say, "And the earth will be turned upside down. There won't be a branch or a root left to any of them. The world will be, God will completely clean off the face of the earth." I mean, it's like there's major things happening, and he couldn't fix the earth this time by putting water on it because it would be uninhabitable because of radiation. We got hundreds of nuclear power plants that would all flood, and it would just be unrecoverable. So he's doing it with fire this time. Then this is from my friend Gil Broussard, who believes that Planet X has come through the system more than once. And if you look at his research here, like, Venus, 2,500% increase in brightness. Jupiter, 200% increase in brightness. Uranus, big change in brightness, increased global cloud activity. Pluto, 300% increase in atmospheric pressure. The moon is growing in atmosphere. This is, I mean, it's just like all this stuff's happening, and all of the government's telling us about global warming, but they don't tell you that it's happening throughout the solar system. It's not us doing it. There's something affecting all the planets in our solar system currently. And if you go out and look at Venus, you go, wow, it's really bright. Have you noticed that? It's really bright.
Wow,
so the mainstream media is now into Planet X. This shocked me. Gil sent me this clip, and I thought, you got to see it. This is like a talent show, okay? So she's about to...
Right.
Here are the world experts that I'm going to introduce to you. Professor Eliyahu Rips, who I've been talking about, just a sweet, humble, soft-spoken genius.